Well, welcome everybody. I didn't expect to have a large audience today because this was kind of an impromptu live stream. What started this was I was going to do a YouTube video. That's honestly what I was going to do. And then it got really long. And I thought, well, usually the long form content does better as a live stream. And then you can get real audience participation, reaction, comments, things like that. So I decided that I would go live and talk to you guys because reached I have reached the 3-year anniversary of my surgery, and I was shocked. I was actually floored. I had received a bunch of emails this week in social media direct messages stating that, hey, I just saw you on Dr. Pimple Popper. I guess a rerun had come up. I didn't know you were on that. I didn't know anything was going on. I didn't even know you faced some of that stuff that you talked about in that episode. And so I was talking to some buddies of mine who are in the YouTube space, and they were like, yeah, you know what? You should do a video on that. People can really relate, and it might help somebody. So I started to do the YouTube video. I started to record it, and I'm like, dang, man, that's just 40 minutes of just me talking without even showing anything, when I can do it better live because I'm not pressured that I could go back and edit it. I could just do it live and get instant reactions and get instant feedback on it. So it's not just going to be me talking. I actually want to show the episode. I have it edited down to where it's just me. If you haven't seen the episode, I'm just going to tell you right now, if I go to play it and you're squeamish and you don't like blood and you don't like surgery related content, you're going to want to tune out. You're going to want to turn it off. And that's okay. If you're just here to hear the story, that's perfectly fine as well, because I wanted to give it some backstory. I wanted to give it, I guess, a foreword, if you will, because people seeing the episode, they saw that I promoted that I was going to be on the episode, but nobody really knows why or how did it happen, and I guess the why, right? That's the big question. And I know I haven't done a live stream in a while, and I've really just been trying to find myself. I've been trying to reinvent myself. I've been trying to figure out the best course of content for me. And right now, I've been really, really grinding and trying to build my subscriber base and do content every day. I've been trying to give quality content, not just content. And I don't want to just go live just to go live. And I feel like if you haven't figured it out already, I had to kill game time. I feel like I put so much effort and emphasis into everybody else that I haven't put the same amount of time into me. And I feel like over the last couple of years, I have been really grinding for everybody else, trying to give them a voice. And that's really what I've done in this community. I feel like when I look back, and at the end of the year, I always try to look back and see, like, what have I done? What are things that I could change? And this was one of those things where I feel like I've helped other creators that nobody knew about become who they are. And I mean, yeah, it's something to be proud of, but then I neglect my own stuff, and then I neglect my own content, and I neglect myself as a creator. And, I look back and I see all the live streams that have popped up and people doing live streams. And if you asked every single one of them, just about everybody has talked to me about what they could do, what equipment I recommend, and what things, and I've given my advice, and I love doing that stuff. I love helping creators. And then I went to the conventions, and being at the conventions, I realized I have a lot to offer this space. I have a lot to offer this community from the conventions, and I've received positive feedback from that. So this is all going on in my head, and I'm like, what is the Tech Buzz Gaming? Like, I feel like I'm just a hub for every other creator, right? To do a combined show with them, to create content. But what am I doing for myself? What am I doing? I mean, that was the whole reason you reached out to Dr. Pimple Popper. That was the whole reason you reached out to Dr. Lee. So I'll get back to that later on. But I saw an ad. Somebody had asked me, they said, well, how did you even did you get approached by her? Did she see a video? I mean, what really happened? So if you go back and watch some of my videos from like 3 years well, about 3.5 years ago, or even some of the live streams from the Retro Buzz with me, Glenn, and Doug, you'll see that I had an issue with my nose. I had what was called rhinophyma, which is caused by rosacea, and so it basically made my nose enlarged, right? So it made it hard for me to breathe. It made it hard for me to speak without sounding super nasally. And what it did was it caused a lot of the keyboard warriors, the trolls, and I know. You guys are sitting here in the chat room. You're like, you really shouldn't worry about the trolls and the haters and stuff. But you know what? As a creator, it does get to you over time. And I've dealt with it for 15 plus years at the time. And I was like, you know what? I just, it was in that split second. Do you ever make one of those rash, but not rash decisions in that spare of the moment, in that 60 seconds? You make a decision that could potentially alter or change your life. Not necessarily for the bad, but in this case, it was for the good. So I started thinking today I had the day off of work. I took a comp day today. I had some time built up, so I had to take it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to put some time into talking to the community about this, and I'm going to do a video. So for those that can't watch live, they can go back and watch it. And I'm going to play the actual episode if you didn't get to see it. So I sat there, and I don't remember if it was a Google ad or if it was a Facebook ad. I forget, but one of them, it said, Dr. Pimple Popper now looking for cast. Click here to apply. So right away, in your mind, you sit there and you go, yeah, right. This is just one of those ads that pop up, forget it. But something inside me just said, you know what? Click on it. So I clicked on it. And it said, in that little blurb, it said, why do you want, put a paragraph or 2 or 3 or even pages, why we should help you, why Dr. Lee should help you. And I'm sitting there, I'm not one to write paragraphs. I hate writing. So I was just like, you know what? My name is Stephen Haywood. I do a live stream. At the time, it was the Retro Buzz, and I said, we do it on gaming, and we do a lot of things in that space, and I have some co-hosts, and I'm a assistant pastor, a children's pastor, and I do some cosplay for kids. I like to dress up as Spider-Man and Darth Vader and go to these places just to put smiles on kids' faces. And I do YouTube videos. I'm a content creator, but I've got a problem. My nose. And I have rhinophyma, and I need help. And I wrote help all in big words. And I sent it. That was all I wrote. And it was funny because I had no aspirations. I had nothing that told me that I was going to even have an opportunity. I didn't even tell my wife. I told nobody. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anybody. I was like, they're all going to think I'm stupid. They are all going to think I'm crazy for doing this. They're going to be like, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, right? That's what you all would say, right? Gallagher guy in the chat room, he goes, I'm surprised it was real. And that was my mentality with it. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm sitting here going, okay. So I didn't tell anybody. And man, a couple weeks went by, a couple months went by, and I was out mowing the grass, and I don't remember if I had to go get weed whacker string or something, but I had like my headphones on, I had music going, and I got off. I have a 0-turn mower, so I got off the mower and I started walking to the garage. And I remember I was about to go in the garage, and I felt like my phone vibrated. And, in my head, I'm sitting there going, oh, it's just one of those ghosts. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You get those ghost vibrations when you've been on something that vibrates for a while. Like you start feeling like you got notifications when reality you don't. Or like if you have a smartwatch and you take it off for the day, you still feel like it's vibrating on your wrist when reality it's not even on your arm. It was one of those things in my head, so I didn't really think about it. And so when I went into the garage, I got that vibration again. So I pulled it out and looked, and it's like, oh, somebody called. I didn't recognize the number, but they left a voicemail. So when I when I opened it up, it was visual voicemail, and it said like, call me back and blah, blah, blah. This is the producer. I just saw those words, and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta listen to this message. So I hit the button to listen to it, and it says, "Hi, this is so and so from the production company that works with Dr. Pimple Popper, and we'd like to interview you to see if you'd be a good fit for the show. When can we do it?" So now I'm trying to process all this at once. I mean, we're talking probably 5 or 6 months before I heard anything. And I'm trying to process this going, is this really happening? Did they really call? Are they really calling me back? No, this can't be real. So I stood there and I listened to the message again, and I was like, all right, I'm going to bite. I'm going to call him back because I'm thinking, maybe it's one of those sites pretending. Again, it's you start thinking about this. This can't be real. So I get on the call with the producer. He answered right away, picked up, and I said, yeah, I can do it anytime. I work from home. Um, I um, I'm out mowing the grass right now, but I could do it later. And he said, yeah, later would be great. What, how's like 5:30, 6 o'clock? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. I said, my wife will be home from work by then. And he says, that's great, because he said, you could bring your support person. If that's your wife, then great. Bring your wife. So I says, okay, all right, I'll do that. So I call my wife. I'm like all frantic. I'm like, when you get home, don't have any delays. Don't stop anywhere. Just get home. We got to do this. She's like, okay. And I didn't tell her at that point what it was. I still hadn't told her anything yet. So she gets home and she goes, well, what's this interview? Is it a job interview? Is it something for the internet? Is it something that like what is this? So I was like, I can't tell you right now. I can't you know it's just one of those things where it's like I said to her, I said, I can't really, just get ready. That's what I said to her. And I'm sorry, I don't have the comments 100% set up. So, um, but P-Dub says, what an incredible story and adventure you went on. And then that's what we're getting to. So I'm trying to build the backstory so everybody can kind of see where we're going here with this. So my wife says, okay, so she went up, got ready. She threw on top. I said, well, it's going to be over Skype. So of course me, right? Because I'm trying to make the best impression I possibly can. I wasn't just going to sit in front of a laptop screen. I piped Skype in like I would normally do for a broadcast, right? We're sitting in front of the TV, and I had the nice background, and I had, all this stuff, right? I had my wife sit next to me. We had the microphones. We sounded like professional, and I'm like, I want to nail this, right? So I said, oh, by the way, I said to her, I said, I filled out this thing to be on Dr. Pimple Popper to hopefully have her fix my nose. I said, if I up until this point, as a teenager, and you're going to see it in the video, as a teenager, I suffered with it. My face was super bright red all the time. And, just always problems. No dermatologist could figure out anything. They couldn't figure it out. I mean, I had like 30, 40 needles in my face as a teenager. And it's not that I didn't go to the dermatologist. They just couldn't figure it out. My gram used to take me. And my gram has since passed. And I there's days that I wish that she could see me now. But she took me, because my parents didn't have a lot of money. So, she took me. And, they guaranteed it was going to work, but it never did. So, just for those maybe that don't know, if you're watching, I'm going to show you. This is what my nose looked like, back before the surgery. And this is what I sent to Dr. Lee. This was part of what I sent to Dr. Lee, and we're going to get to that other part of the interview. Okay, Dr. Lee, you can see that it's abnormal. Like if I look at it like that, it looks like this side's a little bit larger than this side. It does affect my breathing a little bit. You can hear I'm really nasally. A lot of times when it's cold, you can kind of see like it's cold right now. I get black and blue in here. I guess that's the blood vessels closest to my nose to surface. But over in here, sometimes I can get crustaceans in there. If I press on it, it feels, you can see like I get like pus coming out of it. A lot of times, like it feels like cartilage, like if you felt like your ear. Certain places it looks like it's harder than others. But it's very uncomfortable, and it's not something that, people, want to see, especially for somebody that's on air. So there you could see, for or maybe you never knew this or not, you just watch my content now, or you've just become a fan in the last year or two, you would think nothing's wrong with my nose. You would think there was nothing different, right? A lot of people don't pay that close attention, but there are people that do. And um, so that was what we had to send to Dr. Lee. Okay, but I wanted to preface this. So we get in this interview. Okay, my wife's sitting there. I'm like, oh, by the way, I said, this is an interview with Dr. Lee's producer about going on the show. And she kind of looked at me. She's like, you applied for that? She's like, and I was like, I'll explain later. I said, just know that this is what we're doing. She's like, okay. So I get on the call with the guy, sending this video. And then my heart started to sink, because he's like, as much as we would like, this is how he starts the conversation. As much as we would like to help you. And right away, your mind goes, dang it. They changed their minds. Like, that's where my head went. My head went, they changed their minds. For that split second that came into my head. I'm like, crap. And he goes, as much as we'd like to help you, we also need somebody to be entertaining. See, I didn't listen to that part, right? I immediately went to the worst. And I think a lot of us do that sometimes. So I started thinking I was going. I was like, okay, all right. All right, you need to be entertaining. So I'm listening to this, right? And he goes, you need to be entertaining. And I was like, okay, I can be entertaining. I think I'm pretty entertaining. I can do this, right? I can do this. So I'm sitting there, and I see your comments coming in. I'm going to put them up on the screen. I can do this. And so he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys some questions. And what I'm going to do is put myself on mute. And then I want you guys to respond. The first thing that comes to your mind, however you would respond to it, we need to be able to, we need to be able to see where we can go from here. So I'm like, okay, I can do this. Okay. So he goes, the first question is like a double header. He goes, how long have you had this issue, and when did you first notice it? So I'm sitting there going, okay, how do I want to answer this? And then he would say, all right, I'm going to mute. And then he would just go like this. And so he muted and he went like this. And I says, I looked at my wife. I said, what you'd say about 15 years, probably since we got married, it started to happen. She shook her head. Yeah. And I said, it happened. I went like that to her. I said, it happened the time. I remember the one night. I said, she had just made a casserole. We had just gotten married, and she had made a casserole. We were in our apartment, and I said, I remember it just tasted bad. I don't know what it was. I just remember I sat there and I said, you know what? This is just bad. In my head, I'm saying this. Obviously, I wouldn't say it to my wife. But then she said, what's the matter? Don't you like it? I was like, no. I was like, do you want me to tell you the truth? She's like, yeah, I want you to tell me the truth. And I was like, this is just probably the worst casserole I've ever had. Meanwhile, now my wife is sitting next to me on this interview. And I'm sitting there, saying this, and she's just kind of like looking at me like, what's he talking about? And I said, Jen, just out of the blue, after I said it was the worst casserole I ever had, I said, she turned, and I said, she just swung as hard as she could. And last thing I remember, I said, I remember waking up on the ground, and now my wife has this mortified look on her face on camera. She is looking at the camera. Like, almost like, what are you, that never happened. She's sitting there, and she does one of these. She goes, during the response, she goes, what are you talking about? She goes, that never happened. And I said to her, and the guy on the screen, because I said this with a straight face, like telling this story, he said, he came off, he was laughing. He almost fell off the chair. He goes, that's what I'm talking about. He said, that entertainment value. He says, obviously, he goes, you're not going to say that on TV or anything like that. But he said, that's what I want. He says, I don't want somebody to be sitting there like Stanley Willard and being like, so I had this problem and my nose is big. And like, they want somebody that has a personality. I guess that's the best way to put it, right? And so I'm sitting there, and we got through the interview, and I'm like, oh, we got off and my wife's like, you got some explaining to do, after the interview. And I explained to her what happened. She goes, well, you didn't have to do that. She goes, I love you how you are. I accept you how you are. Your family, your friends. I remember telling good friends of ours, we had them in youth group, Liz and Cody, and they were just like, hey man, you do what you got to do to make you happy. But, it is, we don't see that, it's just, you're you, and I think a lot of people got to that point, including myself. I got to the point where I sat there and I pretended as if it didn't exist. Like I did not have this problem. Like in my head, when people would point it out, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't have this problem. This is my nose. This is how it is. Because you try to bury it. You try to deal with it in the best way that you know how. And for the longest time, I sat there and said, these guys shouldn't pick on me. These trolls on the internet, these keyboard warriors, I'm not supposed to feed the trolls, but they shouldn't pick on me. It's not my fault. But the reality is it was my fault because I should have gotten it taken care of in the beginning. I shouldn't have procrastinated. I shouldn't have waited 15 years to do something about it. I shouldn't have had to get to that point. But I guess in my head, I sat there and went, well, you were in dermatologist's office year in and year out, and they didn't do anything, so why bother, right? You ever get to that point, guys? Do you ever have an ailment with your body, or maybe you're still struggling with something and you go, you know what? Why bother? They can't do nothing for me. That's the place that I was at. That's where I got to the point when I filled this out, and this is all going through my head. I got to the point where I said, if Dr. Lee cannot help me, I'm convinced nobody on this planet besides God Almighty could help me. God himself would have to do something. That's the point that I had gotten to. And I was determined. So we had that interview, and listen, it was worse than buying a car or or getting a mortgage, because we went through six or seven more interviews with different production companies, with different producers, trying to get a feel for us. Well, they fell in love with the personality. They fell in love with the story. They had me give us a tour of my game room, and they thought that was really cool. And so we were on target. We were on track. This was going to happen. This was like mid 20, almost to the end of 2019. Yes, we were almost to the end of 2019. And they set a date for me to come out in November. Yes, it was September. No, October. I went out in October. And if you remember, at the beginning of 2019, something happened. We had the C word. I don't know if I could say it on YouTube without them triggering me. I don't know if the algorithm. So we all know what the C word is, and it's not cancer. It hit the pandemic. The pandemic hit, and I sat there and I went, "You've got to be kidding me!" After everything I went through, after all this time, really? like seriously, really? I'm going, and at that point, I sat there and I said, "This can't be happening." I went through all this. I've waited all this time. It was within my grasp. I was there. They had a date. I was, and the producers just kept telling me, "Well, we're gonna have to wait and see. We're gonna have to see." As of right now, it's still going. Every week, I got a message. As of right now, it's still going. It's still going. Then a week before I went, the beginning of October, I got a message from them that said, yeah, things are closing up, but we're going on as scheduled as planned. The only difference is you have to get a COVID test. Oh, there I said it. Whatever. 2 days or 48 hours before you get on a plane. We have to make sure that you're good. And then when you get here, we'll have to check your temperature. I think it was like twice a day. I forget what it was, but so I went, I took the COVID tests, which I'll tell you was the worst. If you guys ever had to take one of them tests, I am sorry. I don't think the lady could shove it up as far. Dude, it was awful. It was probably the worst experience that I ever had. I'll do that surgery with Dr. Lee over this again. So I took that. I took a picture, sent them the results. They're like, okay, cool, you're good to go. They confirmed my plane tickets. They brought my wife out. We're on a plane. So now, mind you, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're on the plane with recycled air, with people coughing and hacking, and I'm doing everything. This was one time I hated wearing masks, but this was one time I was like, I'm glad I got my mask. Like, I was very anti-mask. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. I couldn't breathe right with it, and I'm just like, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. I'm on a plane. The worst place you could possibly be is on a plane in a crowded airport going to LA, which is another hot. This was a hot spot. If you look back, it was one of the biggest hot spots in the country. We're going into LA. And I'm like, okay, God, just protect us. So I'm sitting there, and we landed, and it was really cool because I felt like a celebrity because they had a crew pick my wife and I up the airport, asked us if we were hungry or anything, stopped, got us some food, took us to the hotel. Um, the hotel was kind of like, it was a nice hotel, but it was kind of off the beaten path. Like, people didn't, you know where it was at. And they said, okay, we'll be here tomorrow at this time to take you in for the filming, with Dr. Lee. Now, I'm going to pause there for a second because they also came to my house because during COVID, a week before I flew out, they came to my house. They had a camera crew that they hired because of COVID and the pandemic. They couldn't send their normal crew out. So their crew came in and followed us around for 2 days. It was like 20 hours of filming, only for them to take, I think the whole episode with me in is like 15 minutes. And I was the headliner of that episode. So 15 minutes, the whole episode. So they were in here, and I wish I could show you some of the B-roll video and pictures that I have of that, but I think the company would probably get mad at me because they were like, you can only use it for yourself. I'm taking a chance even going to show the episode on here, but it's not to show, that's not to pirate, it's to tell my story. And I think that they'd be okay with that. So they're here, they're filming, they're asking us questions, they're following me around. It was the weirdest thing. Like, I don't know how people do reality TV. Because, like, I went to go to the bathroom the one time, and the guy's I'm like, dude, you're not coming into the bathroom with me. I'm like, I get it. You got to film everything, but I'm drawing the line. You're not following me in. So I want to state this because you tell them the story of some of the things that happened to you, and then we recreate it and they film it. That's what happens. And so it was kind of interesting for my kids to have to do it. And when people say the reality TV, it's like all staged and all fake. It is staged to an extent, but these are real stories that people really had to deal with. And so that's what I want to preface it with that. So after going back now to, I'm in California, they come and pick us up. They have like, literally, it's a minivan that has all darkened windows. We had to stay in the van because Dr. Lee has an office there that they take everyday patients. Okay, they come in, and so they don't see who's going to be on the show. You have to stay in the van. They'll bring you water, they bring you food, and like I said, you feel like kind of like a celebrity. And even the enclosure you're going to see in the episode, the enclosure that they have you sitting outside because of the pandemic, they made it so people could not see in and see who the people were. So you do the interview with her. They do everything all one. Like, I had the procedure the same day as the consultation. Like, it was like all day long. Like, it was nonstop. And for me as a video producer, it was really awesome to kind of learn some tricks from the pros to try to see how to do certain things with video. So it was pretty awesome. So my wife got some pictures when we were in the minivan, and being able to do, I guess, when I had to do some walkthroughs and things like that. What I'm going to try to do here, I'm going to go back and pull up some of that. But I want to make sure I get my timelines right, because when we went into 2020, that's when I believe, yes, okay, my timelines are correct. So I wanted to make sure that, because No, it wasn't 2019. It was 2020. That's what it was. The pandemic was full force in 2020. So yeah, I know. So again, my timelines are skewed. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to show you guys, if you'll bear with me here. What I want to show you is some things here that you could see. So this is never before seen stuff, if you will. So this is outside where you go to check in. My wife was here. I'm going to play the video. My wife was sitting in the van and she was filming. There you could see the film crews actually following me. I had to do my walk-ins that you'll see during the actual production. And I'm not going to show everything, but they have you walk and they tell you, okay, I want you to walk, and they have different angles that they shoot. Obviously, it's because of you know, with the production, they have to do it a certain way. So I wanted you guys to kind of experience a little bit of this. This is the van. This is the van we were in. You can see she's filming through the windshield. You can see we're going to meet Dr. Lee for the first time. She wasn't allowed to get out of the van until, I don't even think, through surgery. I think she was in the van most of the time, but she was there to support. There you can see, they're filming. We're there. We're running through that. Dr. Lee comes out. And let me tell you something. Dr. Lee is probably one of the nicest people. You see these doctors on TV and you sit there and you go, yeah, right, they just got to be like that because they're on TV. No, she is totally different. She is the epitome of somebody who actually cares. Like at one point she threw people out, the filming crew out of the office, and she said, look, I got to be a doctor now. There's going to be things he doesn't want to talk about on camera. Get the cameras out of here. And she told me to turn my mic off. She's like, do you have any questions or any concerns about this before we go into it? So I want to state that for the record, that if you had any kind of ill thoughts towards some of these reality shows, let me tell you, to the point where I even had her cell phone, which I still do, where I was sending her pictures of my healing process. So these are all things, like I said, we shot. Let me show you another video here. You could see, like, during COVID, when they were filming in my home, we couldn't do this because in the TV world, okay, you have a director and then you have all these other people, these filming crews. We couldn't do this in my home because of COVID. So what they did was they sent out a crew who came in, and they set up, and they thought it was really cool because they were able to use my equipment here to send some feeds and stuff. I'm going to pull some of that up so you guys could see. They had the producer on Skype. So the one guy's only job was to hold a laptop with Zoom on it, so she could see what is going on. And you could see right here, they're filming me, and I sent the signal back to their producer so they could have more angles, to look at and record. But we were set up. That's kind of how we were set up to do it, which was really cool. It was a real interesting concept to do that. So they basically followed us around. We went to my buddy Mike's Wildcard Video Games and we did stuff. When we got finished with all the filming, I'm out in California. I know I'm jumping around, but there's a lot to kind of go through. We went in, we did the surgery, and Dr. Lee, during that time, which you won't hear on the show, she couldn't get me numb. And that's something you won't hear or see about on the video. She couldn't get me numb. She stuck me, I would say, if you asked her, probably 20 to 25 times with numbing solution, whatever they put in the syringe. And I kept feeling it. And it wasn't just, okay, you felt it a little bit. I felt it. I have a hard time getting numb, even when I go into the dentist and, Novocaine, if he has to do like drill, I'll feel certain things, and I'm like, just go. You got to do it. He's like, I'm almost done. I'm like, just go, and you grin and bear it. This was kind of the same way. She goes, can you feel it? I was like, yep. So she'd stick me a few more times. She'd come back. She's like, can you feel that? I'm like, yep. And we did that for a good 45 minutes to an hour. And I'm like, listen, I flew over 2,000 miles. Just do it. I will grin and bear it. She goes, well, if it gets too bad, let me know. And I was like, okay, I won't. They didn't put that on there, but I did it. That at one point she says, all right, wise guy. They threw that in there because, or something along those lines, because that was my response to her. Like, okay, I won't, because I wasn't going to tell her. I was like, I am here. I'm in the chair. I don't care if I have to leave fingerprint marks. We are going to get this done and we're going to do it. Right. So I get done and it's swollen as all could be, between the solution that she puts in to numb you and her grinding and bleeding. And at one point, I know there's dramatic effect that they put in there, but at one point she was like, you're bleeding a lot. I don't know if I can keep going. I'm like, please keep going. Please. I was like, I don't care if I'm bleeding. I'll let you know if I get lightheaded. How's that? And she started laughing. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. I'm like, I can't. She's like, no, we're going to do our best to keep going. But for dramatic effect, they put it in there like, oh, we don't know if we're going to be able to, keep going. So we get all done, and I see it. It's just all swollen. It's just, which you're going to see in the video. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome. This is awesome. You guys might look at it and go, wow, it's still pretty big at the time. And, but I knew it was swollen. I could feel the pressure was lifted. And I went, we do follow-up interviews. What's my thoughts? How do I feel? That kind of thing. I went home and I walk in the door and my daughter goes, Dad, I thought they fixed your nose, because I had this big bandage on. And she had this big bandage on, like it was bigger than when I left. And I was like, oh, it's just a bandage, right? So I think I had to keep it on for 6 or 8 weeks, which I was a terrible patient with that. Like, I had to put Neosporin on. It was just I had to wrap it every day. Fortunately, through the pandemic, I wore a mask, so it covered up a lot of it. So people just thought I had 2 masks on, but it was really a pain in the butt. But I wasn't nervous. We went to people's houses. I wasn't nervous like they were going to make fun of it because I had this big bandage on the end of my nose, or when we went to the church and we didn't have to wear masks. I was just kind of like, I knew what was under that bandage. And I think people were really, they were curious to see what it was going to look like. So they would talk to me about it like, oh, I heard you were on there. And it was more or less like a sympathy thing than like, you look goofy with this big thing on your nose, the bandage. So we got close to, now I got the timelines right. December 2020. It was the beginning of the year. It was around the 5th. And I got a phone call from the producer. At this point, I'm sending messages back to Dr. Lee. I'm showing her the healing process. You could see when the swelling went down. You could see, like, even at the end of this video, you could see some discoloration between my normal skin tones. You could see, like, now my skin, you could see is anybody that's met me in Cleveland could see it doesn't look like it did on the show. And, like, the redness isn't pronounced there. Like, my skin tone is, all one skin tone. And, everything's starting to get back to normal. And I get the phone call from the producers. And they're like, so how's everything going? I'm like, it's good. Dr. Lee's really pleased with the healing process. And they're like, that's good. Speaking of Dr. Lee, they're like, she'd like you to come back out and do a touch-up. And she feels like she could fix a few other things now that it's healed. Things that she missed because it was, no offense, but your nose was so big, like she couldn't see it. And I stopped. And immediately in my head, I played back everything I went through. Everything, to the numbing, to where I couldn't get numb, to sitting in the chair, to going through all this. We're still in the height of the pandemic. I have to get back on a plane. I got to go to LA, and I'm going. So I was like, when are you thinking about doing this? can I think about it? Well, we kind of want you to go for a COVID test tomorrow, and we want to put you on a plane on Friday. The procedure will be early Saturday morning, and then you'll be back on a plane to go home on Sunday. I'm like, this week? And they're like, yep. And I said, so my nose is going to be in a bandage for Christmas? And she's like, well, it'll probably just come off. And, but she's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm going to have to think about this. Let me talk to my wife. So I went in and I talked to my wife. And she's like, what are you, nuts? She's like, they're paying for you to come out. They're going to fly you out there. They're going to do a touch-up. And I was like, whoa, wait a second here. I'm like, you saw what I had to go through. And now you can't even go out because you have to work. So I'm doing this all by myself. She's like, do it. She's like, if you don't call and tell them that you're going, I'm going to call them and tell them you're going. So I was like, okay, all right. Okay, I'll do it. So I called him back up. I said, okay. So I went in for a COVID test. Of course, I was negative, and I did that. And you had to do it for 48 hours. Some airports were requiring you to show that you had a test within 48 hours. Fortunately, I didn't go through any hotels any airports that required temperature taking, which I was fine. But I remember, okay, she went in, she touched up. It wasn't as bad as the last time. They did some additional filming. I was in and out. Like, it was like a blur of a weekend. I was in and out. And I remember getting on the plane early Sunday morning. And I remember that we got on the plane and I was watching the free TV stuff that they had on the, like some of the planes that you can get on, they have the embedded screens and they give you, like, you could see where you're going. And, I had to switch planes, and I think it was Dallas. Yeah, I think it was Dallas. Oh, no, it's Phoenix. Phoenix on the way, because my wife and I, we struggled in Dallas. It's easier when it's one person, but Dallas is just so big. If you've ever been to Dallas Airport, it's nuts. We went to Sky Harbor because I know Sky Harbor really well. When I used to work in California, I always had to take that and swap planes. So I remember doing that, and I remember when I landed in Phoenix, they closed the airport in LA, shut down. LA shut down completely. Like, nobody was coming in, nobody was coming out. And I just remember, just thanking God. I was like, thank God I got out of there. Because, here you just had a surgery. It's the beginning of December. You're getting ready for Christmas, and now you're going to be stuck because of a pandemic in Los Angeles, one of the biggest hot spots in the world, right? So fortunately, I was feeling good. I wasn't sick or anything. When I got on the plane in Phoenix, I knew I was on my way home. I was good. I got home, and they wanted to come in. I want to say they came in before Christmas. I think it was a week before Christmas they came in, or a couple days before Christmas, to film the follow-up because they had to get it all together for editing. So that 3 months was a whirlwind. 2 surgeries, tons of filming to produce what I'm going to show you here. And if you asked me, would I do it again? I'm going to let you watch the show, and then I'm going to come back, and we're going to talk about, would I do it again? And again, my experience. So again, I'm going to tell you, this is the point. If you're squeamish, if you don't do well with blood, you could turn the stream off, walk away for 14 minutes and 46 seconds, and then come back afterwards, okay? Because I don't want you to get sick or nauseous, because some people can't handle that. But 14 minutes and 46 seconds, okay? That's your time. And I'm going to start. It's 2:30 Eastern time right now. So at 2:45, you're safe to come back. 15 minutes, okay? I just want to preface that. So let's take a look.
It feels like it's a giant